Okay, so how is a ticket the size of a poppy seed able to cause so much suffering? Here I was at 18 years old, walking out of my car with a handicapped parking pass. I received plenty of glares and confused faces because nothing looked physically wrong with me, but my body was aching, it hurt to use the stairs, and I was feeling unimaginable pain. I went doctor to doctor with no one able to help me. I felt lost, like no one would believe the symptoms I was experiencing. From podiatrists to physical therapists to rheumatologists to general practitioner, no one could figure it out. I started to feel apathetic towards things I used to enjoy doing. I felt alone and began to spiral into depression. School became difficult for me, and so did little things such as getting out of bed. Finally, after getting extensive blood work done, my doctor had good news for me. Now, this is not what most people would consider good news. Finding out you've been suffering from Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and mycoplasma pneumonia. For me, however, it provided a better outlook for the future. I felt a sense of relief to finally receive a diagnosis from my doctors. I felt validated after being an advocate for myself for so long. I knew the treatment was just beginning, but the diagnosis meant the search for answers was over. During this journey, I learned how to mature and become an adult. I had just graduated high school and turned 18, which meant my parents couldn't always hold my hand during every doctor's appointment anymore. Turning 18 means freedom and independence, but transitioning to adulthood is not always easy. I had to learn to advocate for myself, to never give up, and to trust my gut. The agony of spending so much time at the doctor's just to be referred to somewhere else felt like it would never end. There were plenty of days I let the disease get the best of me. Through this, I had to learn to get back up and fight. This diagnosis is an experience for which I will always be grateful because I learned many valuable lessons that have made me a better person. I got a medical withdrawal from all my classes for the semester, but couldn't let falling behind my peers frustrate me. Reflecting on the experience, I was able to learn how to be an advocate for myself and better communicate. Being a shy kid growing up, I avoided meeting new people and stepping out of my comfort zone. I was reliant on my parents to hold my hands through life, but this experience showed me to speak up for myself. I received a higher level of confidence in myself, knowing that I was a fighter. I learned to be resilient and went back to school the next semester determined to succeed. I am proud of myself for learning how to deal with the challenges that have come my way and becoming an overall stronger person. While my symptoms may fade, the lessons I have learned will stick with me. After coming back to college after my medical withdrawal, I decided to try out for my college's cheerleading team. Cheerleading is the sport I have loved since I was 7 and unfortunately had to take a break from during treatment. Through my determination, I was able to make the team and push through relearning some skills. Being able to participate again in the sport I love at the collegiate level has helped me to recognize the emotional and physical strength I have gained. I hope to continue challenging myself during law school. I have the strength and knowledge to get back up and succeed after hitting rock bottom. I am now motivated to be an advocate for my others. I found my voice through my diagnosis, but not everyone has the resources that are needed to speak up for themselves. Through my college coursework, I have been able to explore many aspects of the legal system. Now I want to study criminal law and be a public defender. I want to help give a voice to those that our system is leaving out. Okay, thoughts? Emily's saying what? Emily's not a fan.
It's because they're talking about medical stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe they weren't told to leave the addenda in the addenda section. And then they get like back to coming from cheerleading, and I was like, okay, so this is like an athletics kind of essay. And then I got lost again because they're talking about criminal law and a public defender, and like getting that from being unparentified, totally, we're changing directions like 3 different times.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, not to be too harsh on this person, but this is kind of like random stuff about me, like starting off with the Lyme disease and other things, and then just kind of, okay, well, here's some other stuff you should know, like the lessons I've learned, and then I'll do cheerleading and I'll do criminal law, and I don't see too much how they tie together. Yeah, so agree there. I don't mind being a little bit more critical on this one, just because I think sugarcoating it isn't going to serve anyone here. People need to know what's wrong with this one in order to help everybody improve. So it's in that spirit. This is meant to be constructive criticism, but I think the point about doing multiple statements around these, I think is well taken.
Yeah, I think if you just cut like the top part of the essay, I would be like, oh, they're going to do like defense work for people, or rather plaintiffs work for like medical malpractice cases and talking up for the patient. And then we get down to public defender. I'm like, where did this come from? They need to talk about criminal law or what they did in college that has to do with criminal law. Did they intern for a judge? Did they, where did it come, where?
Yeah, I think if we stop here, like at the end of this paragraph is like takeaways. This diagnosis is an experience. I learned X, Y, Z. I reflected, okay, well, if you hammer out exactly the lessons that you learned, I mean, so you said that you were shy and you were maybe advocating for yourself. I think that was mentioned. Okay, so give me some examples of that. And then all the other stuff, that's separate. That's like, okay, well, I had to take a break from college for a semester maybe. And that kind of took me out of the running in terms of like my transcript has a gap. Explain that somewhere else. Brief addendum, matter of fact, to the point, but go much deeper on the medical stuff. Medical stuff is also tricky. You don't want to be, again, solely negative, but if you really highlight some experiences, that'll at least, I think, put this in a much better place.
I agree with Elisa. Like the telling is too much. The showing needs to be like more examples or like situations.
Yeah. Let's hear more on that.
One question. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, first, Alyssa, do you want to share more on the show, don't tell?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is something that you say all this time, Steve, like show us, don't tell us. And I find a lot of the telling is, can you scroll down actually a little bit for me?
Sure.
Okay. That should be great because it's all right. So even something like a sentence like, while my symptoms may fade, the lessons I have learned will stick with me. A sentence like that, I feel in a personal statement is not necessary, because if you do show us like what you're doing, like the people reading these are very smart enough to say, oh, this lesson is directly how they have applied themselves from what they just said previously. So there's a lot of sentences like that in this particular statement. Earlier too, about having to be independent when they go to the doctor's offices. If they did want to talk about that, you could just talk about the exact interaction you had at the doctor's office. How did you speak to the doctor? How did you overcome the obstacle of maybe you were unsure of yourself when you had to deal with scheduling or the receptionist or not understanding certain terms? Like if you actually say, I think a good question too to ask myself of like when I start to tell more than show is just what happened, what really happened, and what did I do about it, instead of a lot of the it like a backseat sort of driving of saying, and then I had determination, then I had independence.
Exactly. Those vague introductory like preface types of statements, they've all got to go. So like this is an experience for which I will always be grateful because I learned many valuable lessons. Okay, well, let's just get to the valuable lessons. I learned X, Y, Z, or even better, just show us that you learned these things. Like, I don't know all the details of the Lyme disease and the other stuff, but I'm thinking of, let's say somebody suddenly became diabetic and had to inject themselves with insulin and they were scared of needles. Like that would be a process by which you develop some independence and overcome a fear that you have. And you're doing it every single day. So it's a very real thing on the ground that shows us in a way that just saying valuable lessons doesn't do. And we have to kind of guess at what those lessons are. And they're like, okay, well, you had the medical withdrawal, you came back, you did cheerleading. Well, how does cheerleading relate to Lyme disease? I don't see that connection. I'm like, you're stronger, but how? So the doctor gave you bad advice and you did your own research and discovered something new, or you had a conflict with your parents around this. And you had the backing, you did the research, you made a case for yourself, whatever it was, or even just, should you take off a semester or not? Maybe that was a debate where, again, you stood up for yourself. You advocated for what you thought were your best needs at the time. I know there was someone else who had a comment or a question they wanted to share. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great. Thank you.
Okay, I was just want to ask, if she started the essay talking about the medical condition and then how she bounced back and became a college athlete, would it been okay, or it's already too much, like two different directions?
I think it's okay. I think that in a way that the cheerleading could serve the goal of ending on a positive note, especially if there are lessons learned from the medical withdrawal during that time away that then informed, again, like the bravery to try out for something, taking the risk involved, if that was something that was true for this author.
And how could she bounce back and this from how you relate to law school? Because I think that's what she tried to do, but she didn't do a great job with. How could she do better to transition this to how you apply to law school?
That's an excellent question. So one idea that comes to mind for me here, just as a starting point, is at the end, I'm now motivated to be an advocate for others. Okay, so why? Again, tie it back to the medical experience. where did she need to advocate for herself there? Or where, had she not had the wherewithal to stand up for herself, maybe another patient in a similar position would have suffered as a result of failing to have that confidence. And so people like that who may not have the knowledge or may not have the experience or just the strength of character or the drive to do that or the extroversion, whatever it is, maybe they need an advocate like this future lawyer to help them in that process, to help them navigate bureaucracies, to navigate red tape, whatever it was. Especially medicine, there's lots of time, of course. In medicine, there's lots of cases of like, there's the status quo and there's some new revolutionary thing, or there's maybe multiple ways one could go about treating an issue. And there's the default, and then there's whatever you discover and you push for. So I could see that potentially playing out here or in other medical focused essays. And I wouldn't always want people to write a medical focused essay. If they have another topic might be better. These topics can get a little bit into the weeds sometimes, or end up being too negative sometimes as well, and fall into the trap of making excuses. I don't think this one is doing that. I think this author is making a real effort to draw out the lessons and on a positive note. So that's a great thing, but I could see others maybe going down that road.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to call a couple of other comments here. James wrote, towards the middle, the maturity and independence part was repetitive. Yeah, so I think that's around here specifically. And so maybe just summarize that, like cut it shorter. I agree there. And then Michaela is saying, would you implement 2 life examples into your personal statement? Do you put the 2 into the personal statement? Yeah, maybe, especially if you can tie them together. I think that's the key, is not make it like 2 separate things that you just want to talk about both of them. Personal statement has X word count, but it's not any 600 words or 500 words you want. Make it flow smoothly. And so some essays should be cut into multiple: diversity statement, character and fitness, optional addenda. All those are fine other places to include it. Also knowing that you'll have your resume to at least reference something you want them to know about. Any other questions or comments on this one?
The one thing I'd add at the end, particularly after she finishes talking about the cheerleading and tries to change over to criminal law, is she does seem to want to be talking about like helping indigent clients, which I think is a good thing to talk about. But I don't see the equivalence of helping indigent people just because you yourself have learned to be an independent adult. And I wished that had been, clarified or elaborated upon when she's talking about that in the last paragraph.
Yes, well, naturally, indigent and independent are 2 very different things. So I could see why that's not really coming across here. To the idea, like I guess you were talking about the idea of being a public defender. So to me, I mean, I didn't even like give that too much attention just because it's so disconnected. So if she can make a strong case for herself about why she's looking to advocate for others based on her own experience, maybe having to advocate for herself, then fantastic. Make that case. But to me here, it's like, to me, that's like an aside that doesn't really even fit at all. So if you don't want to tie it to law school, you don't have to, but it's nice if you can. And I think there is a way to do that here. But yes, I agree that it's not connected at the moment. Thanks for calling that out.
Steve,
yes?
Just to understand, so in your point of view, it's not so good a person say in a statement that he would like or should like to be a public defender, specific in a way, would the person become to be after finished the law school? Isn't it?
You can mention it, or you can mention it. You don't have to, certainly. They know that your goals may change over time and you may not know all the intricacies of all the different areas of law. And obviously, criminal law is one that is more in the public eye. People are more aware of it in part because of media and such, and because it's obviously an exciting topic. So I suppose that if one can make a compelling case in some way, even simply saying, I want to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves, that alone could be enough. You don't need to have tons of work experience in that particular area. But if you have something, mention it, and certainly don't feel the obligation to mention it. And if it doesn't tie in smoothly, I might not.
Okay, thank you again.
Of course, it's a great question. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.